Alsace were right to be worried. The package I grabbed from Raqqa-sul-Mer contained canisters of plutonium particles, each marked with one word: Todessturm, Deathstorm. We know the package was en route to renowned physicist Dr. Antonello Galvani. Galvani is being forced to work for the Nazis. He's based at the University of Neroli in the north of the country, at the heart of Mussolini's fascist state. His wife, Veriana, is a key informant. It was her who tipped us off about the package. The Nazis must have got suspicious. They placed her under house arrest. She told us her husband had hidden his research papers inside a music box. He also made sure to encrypt them so they can only be read using a cipher. The Nazis don't know any of this yet, but it's only a matter of time. If we're going to learn what Deathstorm is, I need to get the cipher from Dr. Galvani, grab his research, and spring Veriana. Galvani's work is the key to unlocking Deathstorm. Gotta find him, secure the research. No more to find here. Can't find anything else. Think I've grabbed all I can. that's all. Nothing else. Show's over, boys. This'll come in very useful. Galvani's wife, Variana, is a vital Allied informant. She's under house arrest. Have to find and free her. Nothing else to find. Guess I grabbed everything useful. nothing else. The Nazis are broadcasting propaganda at our troops. Killing the propaganda minister would put a stop to it. No more to find here. Can't find anything else. That's all. This'll come in very useful. Galvani's residence is in this quarter of town. Should be where they're holding Veriana.
sich nicht ewig verstecken. Was ist das? Warten auf den rechten Augenblick. Dieser Radgraumacher. Ja, läuft, was heißt? Tu dir das an. Ich halte hier die Stellung. Keine Spur.
Looks like that's the house. Nothing else to find. Looks like that's the house.
Ariana, run for it.
Thank God you made it. Here, take this.
Hope she makes it to Allied lines. The locket she gave me must contain the key to the music box, and to Galvani's research. Guess I grabbed everything useful.
That's all.
Nothing else. This'll come in very useful. No more to find here. Think I've grabbed all I can. comms room. Reckon I can use these radios to my advantage. This map might help me sow some confusion.
is going to be crazy. You're going to be able to dial in horny. You're going to be able to dial in happy. I mean, 50 years from now, who knows what they're going to be able to do.
Well, they're breeding these things called knockout mice, which don't produce the gene which makes X, Y, or Z. And they've developed knockout mice for the enzyme that makes DMT.
Oh, wow.
So there are animals that don't produce any DMT. So you might be able at some point to put genes into people, CRISPR, and have them stop making their own DMT.
Maybe that'd be a good zombie movie. Everybody stops making their own DMT and just...
Well, there's a lot of good movies I think could kind of spring from DMT.
Yeah. Well, if all animals are producing DMT, that's where things get really fascinating, right? And if many plants produce DMT and at least have some of the compounds of DMT in them, like, what do you think is going on?
Well, do you remember that language called Esperanto?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's like a invisible, it's like a spiritual Esperanto. I think that organisms that contain DMT are able to communicate with each other. That's just an idea, but I think you can occupy the same wavelength of communication depending on the configuration of your matter. And it may be that configuration is common to any organism possessing DMT.
Wow.
So it might be, well, how you can communicate with trees, let's say, when you're really stoned on psychedelics or otherwise, but that could be how. That could be, the empathy existing among organisms. Can we take a break?
Yes.
Good.
We'll take a break right now. And we're back. So what were you saying?
Yeah, the first time I smoked pot, I got hooked. It was like, this is the most amazing thing in the world.
Did you recreate that? Or were you, like, to have an experience like that for your first time with the hash?
No, I never did.
Chase that dragon.
Yeah. Well, it was enough. Like, I was convinced that this was going to be something I wanted to study. And after the first time I smoked DMT, I knew that was what I was going to study.
Now, when you had this idea, how did you go about getting approval for a study?
Well, it's a very long strategy. I came up with the idea of studying psychedelics when I was 20. I was doing developmental embryology work at Stanford in the summer between my junior and senior years. I was studying the development of the chicken's central nervous system.
Oh, wow.
In petri dishes. It was very high tech. It was fun.
Wow.
We got 2 papers resulting from the research that I did that year. I wanted to study psychedelics, but I didn't really know how to do it. I thought, well, maybe I'll just get some lab experience. And I was reading all of the books for the next year's classes, which involved Freud and Buddhism and the new developments in consciousness that were coming out at the time. And I was watching the sunset go down one evening, and I flashed, I'm going to study psychedelics and combine Freud, Buddhism, and psychopharmacology. But I was 20 years old, right? And in the beginning, I didn't get a good reception. Most of the medicals... Yeah, well, I applied to 21 medical schools, and the 19 that gave me a chance to tell them why I wanted to be a doctor, they just said, forget it.
So you were honest, unfortunately.
I was out of my mind. Yeah, so... Yeah, so the 2 schools that did admit me, they were either really short interviews or they steered me away from my obsession.
Oh.
But you got the idea that talking about psychedelics when you're 20 years old in the early 70s was not really going to fly. So I kept my interest to myself, but I wanted to get trained enough to be able to do that kind of work at some point in the future. So I went to medical school, and I trained in psychiatry, and took a job up in Alaska, which was around the time that people were thinking and starting to understand winter depression, which then put emphasis on the pineal gland and melatonin. So I thought, that was a entryway into studying the pineal gland and the function of melatonin in humans.
So the pineal gland definitely produces melatonin. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, that's been known since the 40s. Yeah, and there wasn't a lot known back then in the early 80s. So I went back and trained some more in clinical psychopharmacology research, to learn how to do, drug studies, giving drugs, taking samples, doing questionnaires. And so I moved to UNM, University of New Mexico, and ran that melatonin pineal study. And I got my chops as a clinical researcher. And melatonin was not especially psychoactive, we discovered. It just is kind of sedating, and it helps regulate body temperature in the middle of the night. But it was not psychedelic.
Is someone's phone ringing? You hear that? Yeah, I think you accidentally dialed someone.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, Tristan. That keeps happening. It's just Tristan.
Just put the phone on the table.
Yeah, sorry.
Because I didn't know how you pocket call with a flip phone. Did you know that you could do that, Jamie? It was the way it was ringing. I'm like, that's not his ring.
Yeah, I heard a noise, but I didn't know what it was.
But it wasn't his ring. Your ring is like.
Right.
Yeah, I
Was it
apologize.
outgoing?
That was like an outgoing ring.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want someone else listening to our entire conversation.
Yeah, that's Tristan.
Well, but you wouldn't be. I didn't know that it was a flip phone. You wouldn't even be able to pick up without opening it up.
True.
That's so old school of you. I love the fact that you have a flip phone. I think we were all happier back then.
Well, this flip phone is 4G, and I had to upgrade from my 3G flip phone.
They made you, these bastards.
They stopped serving. Yeah. Verizon. They texted me or something and said,
Cut you off, son. It's over.
You have to upgrade to 4G.
Yeah.
So I got this one.
And now they get the 5G. You got to get 5. The 6 is going to come out soon.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to end. Meanwhile, you're just rocking a flip phone. There's something about a flip phone, like hanging up on someone is much more satisfying. Look at that thing. That's all you'd have to carry around. I bet the battery lasts a year. How long does the battery last on this thing?
I keep it charged. 2-3 days, not that long.
It's got a camera to report crime.
It has a camera and it texts.
It does text?
Yeah.
Does it do voice to text?
No.
If it did that, I'd be really seriously thinking about it. Because
Yeah.
that voice to text is so easy. Like you could answer text messages while you're in the car. Just say, "Hey Siri, text Rick Strassman."
You could do that with Dragon
Oh, okay. So if you have Dragon naturally speaking on your phone,
on your phone.
can you get that on that?
Yeah, it will transcribe from the cloud.
On a flip phone?
Well, not on a flip phone.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm
Oh.
saying if that had it, because Siri has it.
Mhm.
You can do it off, or Android Auto has it too.
I spent so much time in front of a screen that
Right.
just one more screen would have just driven me around the bend.
Well, it's driving people crazy because they're just looking to argue with people all day. It's like everyone's mad at everything, and there's so little attention spent to your immediate life and you know what's actually going around you, where everyone's like freaking out about things that are happening nowhere near them most of the time.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I like about living in Gallup, New Mexico, is that you watch the wind. Like it's pretty quiet. And even though people have cell phones there, they're mostly interested in other things: church, the rodeo, the upcoming parades.
Sounds like a good place to live.
It's the most patriotic small town in America.
Really?
Yeah, it was voted.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, there's code talkers out there. The Navajo talkers.
I've heard that expression, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's a great story. You might want
Is
to
that
have
like from the war?
It's from World War II, the Pacific Arena. The Navajo speak a very difficult to learn language, and they put a Navajo in Japan with the troops, and a Navajo stateside, and they communicated using Navajo, and the Japanese could not figure out the language that was being used. Yeah, and the code talkers, the feeling goes with a lot of pride that they were responsible or played a major role in the American victory. So the Navajo.
Wow, that makes sense. Like, how quick would it? 1947. How quick is it going to be to learn Navajo?
Yeah, you may want to get one of those Navajo, code talkers in here. They're all in their 90s, and they're these amazing guys. They're incredibly they're just amazing.
How many of them were there?
There were quite a few. There were probably hundreds. There's maybe like a dozen, 2 dozen that are still alive.
That seems like a story that needs more attention.
It's a really great story. There's a Code Talker Museum that I think just opened in D.C.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Navajo Code Talkers. Check them out. It's a quiet place to live, a good place to read and study and write and walk around. I'm not that current without looking at the news.
Good.
And I could just turn that off.
Yeah, it's just too much for us. I mean, I don't think we should just let corruption, chaos happen. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying for just healthy human beings, the average healthy human being, it is too much to be tuned into all day long, and it's so damn addictive.
Well, it's not good news.
No, and that's what attracts people is the shitty news. The good news gets a quick glance and what should I be mad at? What should I be terrified of?
Yeah.
What are they taking away next?
Well, I kind of don't want to go there, but what do you think of monkeypox?
You don't want to go there? But what do you think of monkeypox? It sounds like you definitely wanted to go there. I think it's a disease that is primarily affecting people who have unprotected, it seems like gay sex, right?
Seems like it.
Seems like it's 90-something% of the cases. There's some sort of a vaccine for it, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there
much
treatment for it? Do they know how to cure it?
Supportive treatment.
That just supportive treatment?
Fluids.
So they just wait until it goes away?
Yeah.
And how long does it usually take to go away?
I don't know.
Is it killing people?
No, it's not killing people, but they're pretty uncomfortable. Those are apparently pretty painful sores.
They look gross.
Yeah.
Is there a bright side that's not killing people?
Yeah.
It's hard to say when some fucking weird disease spreads.
Yeah, and I don't get weird diseases, or I don't even get the news about weird diseases on this phone.
It's made to jump to other people. It's not just people having unprotected gay sex. It's people that haven't had any sex at all. In fact, I think even kids are getting it now.
Extended contact,
yeah,
I think, can do it.
It's a fucking creepy disease, though.
Yeah, it's got a horrible name.
Yeah.
They should call it something else.
Too late, right?
Well, you can call it MPX.
Yeah, but why didn't they just come up with a better name before they just busted out with monkeypox?
Yeah.
But they do that swine flu, avian virus.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a way we connect it to animals. Those zoonotic diseases.
Zoonotics, yeah.
It's creepy. It's creepy how many of them there are out there.
Yeah, I know. So what keeps you going?
With what?
Your kids? Do your kids keep you going?
What do you mean by keep me going?
Keep an optimistic look. Not necessarily optimistic, but what gives you hope?
I think more than I've ever thought before that most people are really good people. Most people try to be really good people. They want to have a good life. Most people.
Mm-hmm.
That's most. I think you're going to deal with certain numbers of people that are trying to make enormous profits and doing so at the expense of either the environment or people's lives, and they're going to influence politicians, and they're going to make laws that benefit these people, and they've done this since the beginning of time. Eisenhower warned about it when he was leaving office. He warned about the military-industrial complex. He warned about all that shit. He warned about, they warned about that when they built the fucking Constitution. But I think overall, most people aren't like that. Most people aren't trying to control people and ruin the earth for profit. Most people are just trying to live their life. It's a significant impact for sure. It's horrible, and it represents us overall. It does, because what are people capable of at their worst? or they're capable of starting unnecessary wars that are going to cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives for profit. We know that people have done that. That's very but that's not you, and that's not me, and that's not Jamie. That's not most people. Most people are good. That's what I think. So that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. I think most people are good, but I think most people are easily swayed.
Well, when things go sideways and when people get scared, their anxiety gets ramped up and they look for something to be mad at, and it ramps up their anger at that person.
Yeah, a few years ago, I was pretty sick for a year. It's in that Joseph Levy book. And as I was recuperating, I was reading concentration camp stories, concentration camp literature. Well, I just wanted to see how low you could go and still come out of it. And you know, the concentration camp culture history is pretty. Well, it's amazing what kind of evil everyday people can, lay on other people. It's just remarkable.
They just got a new guy, didn't they? Just caught a new guard.
Yeah.
And convicted him. I mean, he's in his 90s now.
Yeah, those guys are really old. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
Oh, man. Yeah.
But that people who are alive today participated in genocide in the 40s. Here he is. 101-year-old ex-guard of Nazi camp is convicted by German court. The man, identified only as Joseph S. because of Germany privacy laws. Wow, they're even private of Nazis. Was sentenced to 5 years in prison after being found guilty of being an accessory to more than 3,500 murders. Ooh. 5 years in prison? That's all?
Well, he may not live beyond
all they gave
the
him?
first couple.
Yeah, they might beat him to death in there.
Yeah. He doesn't want a Jewish cellmate.
It actually says it's not even clear if he would even serve the time.
Yeah, he may not.
Oh. So what is the solution? Let him go free? He's too old. He doesn't. He's sorry. What do you, how do you let that guy go free? Even though he's 101 years old, like, what is the answer there?
I think he would have to repent.
How could you repent from that?
He would need to make restitution to the extent that he could to people that he's caused suffering to.
Man, I mean,
what kind of restitution could he make,
what
though?
could he do for 3,500 people?
Yeah. Well, maybe he could tell the truth.
It just freaks me out that that's inside of the last 100 years. It's so recent.
It's really recent. Yeah.
Civilization is such a new thing.
Well, civilization's a new thing. Anti-Semitism isn't.
No.
Anti-Semitism, boy, goes way back.
That's a pretty old one.
It's the world's oldest hatred, is the way I've heard it described.
You want some coffee?
Yeah, some coffee would be great.
Get in there. So we were talking about the difficult road that it took. Cheers, sir. Thanks for being here, man.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks.
It was very fun for me.
Very nice.
Well, you had this idea, and then the long road to actually getting it passed. We definitely don't want to skip over that.
Well, I spent a lot of time training. I went to medical school, my residency, fellowship, and then the 2-year melatonin project was also under training funds. So I stopped training officially when I was 35, maybe 36. I was on training funds until that time. Yeah, so we discovered that there wasn't much psychoactivity that was associated with melatonin. And in the meantime, I had learned about DMT, that it's made in the body. It's incredibly psychedelic. I smoked DMT. The melatonin work was kind of taking me into places that weren't all that interesting. So I switched fields and figured, well, it's now or never. I'm in my 30s. I've got a good appointment at the university. I've got the support of the research unit. And
did you approach them with this idea?
I did. I spoke to my 2 bosses in psychiatry and on the research unit. And they said, get grants and publish and stay out of the newspaper. Those were the 3 bits of advice I got. They said, you know what you're doing, so just go ahead and do it and see what happens. I got support, from the university. Well, this was, 1986, 1987, and people really didn't know about psychedelics at that point. They had become forgotten. They weren't being taught in medical school anymore. There was no research going on for 15, 20 years. So even after I began my study, the research unit director used to joke that people in the study room were smoking mushrooms. So he didn't really know what I was doing. He just wanted me to stay out of trouble and succeed.
How bizarre is it to you knowing that research on the mind never stopped, but research on one of the weirdest things you could do to the mind stopped? And it didn't just stop for a little bit. Stopped for how long? 15, 20 years?
20 years.
20 years.
Much, yeah.
That seems insane, doesn't it? That they wouldn't want to study one of the most profound experiences that's available to human beings.
Well, it's important to think of some context, too. Things were just going crazy with kids taking way too much LSD in the wrong set of circumstances without any preparation. And it was a public health emergency. Emergency rooms and psychiatric units were being filled up. So the government had to do something, from the public health point of view at the very least, which was to make it harder for kids to get their hands on psychedelics. I think that notion that there was a desire to quash understanding what the drugs were doing to people, like in a scientific manner, I don't think that was ever the case. I think it was more that nobody really wanted to challenge the government and submit a really good study that you can back up with safety mechanisms built into place. Once I got my funding and my permits, which was a long process, it took 2 years. The government was super keen on my studies. They were very interested in what we were doing, that we were finding.
When you say the government, like what branch of the government?
Mostly the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, one of the divisions of the National Institutes of Health. They were funding me. Oh, this is cool, too. The first grant I got was from the Scottish Rite Foundation for Schizophrenia Research. It's a branch of the Masons.
Wow.
Very interesting. And, the Masons have a lot of, I agree with the pineal and pine cones. So, that was pretty creepy.
That is creepy. People get freaked out by Masons. They just, without knowing much about it, you hear that someone's a Mason, you're like, oh, boy. What does that mean?
Well, and they were the first funders of my research, which I thought was...
See, all the Illuminati people are going to go crazy now. All the real conspiracy theory people. He's captured by the government.
It was a strange coincidence.
That doesn't sound like a strange coincidence.
Well, there's a more mundane explanation.
Yeah.
One of my mentors, well, maybe it doesn't help clarify things. It may make it more complex, but... One of my mentors was a psychiatrist at UCLA, a fellow named Dr. Friedman. And we got to know each other back in the day. In the 50s, actually, he was giving LSD at the NIH. And I met him, and he supported my work. And he was on a committee, the granting committee for the Scottish Rite Foundation for Schizophrenia Research. And he said, if you could submit a grant on DMT and schizophrenia, you must get funded. It was at least sensible from a schizophrenia point of view, but still, the source of the need came from the Masons.
That's wild. That's another subject that I wanted to talk to you about. There's certain religions that had an exemption for using DMT. And there are religions in America, right? There's like 2 different sects of Christianity that are allowed to take like an ayahuasca drink.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
There's a group called the UDV, and one called the Santo Daime. They're both based from Brazil. They both originated there.
And so these folks, they went and they got religious exemption. How did that go down?
Well, let me think this through. Well, in the early 90s, when I just got my DMT study off the ground, I met the leader of the UDV, an Anglo fellow, Jeffrey Bronfman from Santa Fe, was the North American representative of the UDV. And he asked me about what their strategy ought to be able to drink ayahuasca. So I advised, taking care of all your permits, kind of the way I did it. Just, fill out the forms and, talk to the regulators. And after a while, if you stick with it, chances are good they'll give you permission. Or you could wait to be caught and then, take it to court. In which case you would at least be, getting the experiences underway. The church would be established. You would have a track record of safety.
Yeah, but that sounds like a terrible idea. I would definitely say try to get the opinions in.
Right.
Or rather, permissions in.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's what happened. Is they got, they were discovered importing ayahuasca, which they had been doing for 3-4 years or so. Yeah, and so they took it to court.
So they got caught with it.
They got caught with it. You have to think about it though, because it may have taken them years.
Right, I get it. That makes sense.
And they may never have gotten approval.
So is it possible for them to grow the stuff they need to make ayahuasca here? Do those things have to be grown in other climates, or can they be grown here?
You can grow the plants in either Hawaii or Florida.
Right. I knew people grew them in Hawaii. I didn't know Florida. Interesting. So if Florida opened it up, they could have ayahuasca plantations.
Yeah.
And just, that tropical environment down there.
Well, you'd have to work out, the regulatory and the organizational structure, kind of like they're doing in Oregon, which it seems like it's kind of halting. Are you familiar with what they're doing in Oregon?
In Oregon, they seem to be decriminalizing basically everything.
Right. Well, they've legalized, psilocybin, which means that the state's getting involved in a board and certifying.
Really?
Locations.
So they legalized it for recreational use or medicinal use? Do you have to have a prescription? Or
No. They're going to be setting up psilocybin centers.
Holy shit.
Dispensaries.
Wow.
And
that's wild.
And you could be a certified psilocybin sitter.
I wish Portland wasn't such a hot mess. Portland's such a hot mess. That city's such a hot mess.
Well, the smaller counties in Oregon have got the right to ban psilocybin, and they're doing it. So fewer and fewer counties seem interested.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's passed statewide. You're going to have to find some county that's going to give you the green light, and that's where people are going to start growing their stuff. It's going to come with a lot of problems. Like one of the problems that happened with marijuana was the early days, banks didn't want to get involved. They wouldn't allow people to use credit cards because they didn't want to be connected to that. So people had giant wads of cash, and they were hiring these special forces guys to take their cash.
Smelling from pot.
Yeah, stinking of pot. And the whole thing was really sketchy because everybody knew you're leaving that spot with bags of cash. Mm-hmm. Like everyone knew you have cash there, and so you have to really worry about getting robbed and killed.
Yeah, it's interesting to follow what's happening in Oregon. It's supposed to all be in place by January 1st.
That's going to be wild. It's going to be wild.
I think there'll be some problems.
Yeah, well, for sure. That's the problem if it happens. If it happens federally, if some wacky president decided to let all the psychedelics free, we're going to have a lot of people lose their fucking marbles. The question is, aren't we already? And how much of a difference would it be? And would it be a difference? Or would those people have already lost their marbles? There's a lot of questions, I guess.
Yeah, well, you have to educate people.
Right.
in the best way to trip.
And they maybe should have some research on how to help people that have had bad trips.
Right.
Maybe there's like a good cocktail of medications to fucking bring you back to earth.
Yeah, yeah. Like if it's a bad experience, traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
It's like PTSD in a way.
Some people have really bad ones, and they freak out, and they don't know what to do, and then they get elevated anxiety, and it sort of cascades.
You've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to be seeing more of that.
Yeah. Look, I had one DMT trip that was I think we did it 3 times in an afternoon. And I had the last one was really, really, really powerful. And I had like a very slippery grip on reality for like 2 weeks after that.
That can happen.
Yeah, that's how I describe it, as like slippery. Like I was doing everything normal. I was driving to work normal. I was doing it, but everything felt slippery. Like everything can go wrong at any second.
Slippery is a good term. Well, that happened to me after my first, 5-methoxy DMT experience. For about 3 days, I just didn't really feel like I was in my body, that I was really kind of interacting with things in a coherent manner.
That stuff is interesting. I mean, I really want to know your thoughts on that stuff, because that's a weird experience in that it seems like you just go away.
Yeah, you do go away, and even though people seem to be talking it up, I'm not sure if going away is that good a thing.
I want to explain that to people that don't know what we're talking about. When I mean go away, I mean it feels like you're dying, and then it also feels like you don't exist anymore, so you don't have any thoughts while you're over there. It's the weirdest experience. It's all white.
It's just this whiteout.
Yeah, it's like this full whiteout, but it's somehow cleansing. Like you come out of there like lighter.
It's like being in the center of the sun.
Yeah, there's something about when you come back, you feel like everything's going to be fine. Like it's so wild in the beginning. It's so terrifying when you first enter into it. Mm-hmm. But then when you come out of it, you're so happy you did it.
Well, I think that's a concern, is that you feel so good after you've come through and you want to replicate that.
Right.
I've seen people use 5-methoxy addictively, habitually. They just want to get back to that state over and over. And you don't really see that very often with DMT. DMT itself has so much information.
There's a dude I knew who he went so many times, he was doing it so often, that he said the entity started to tell him to stop coming.
Yeah.
He was doing DMT like every day.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, man. That seems like a lot.
Well, do you think it was the entities telling him to stop it, or that it was just his mind saying, you're killing me? I mean, let's take a break.
Yeah, I mean, or what are those things? What is your mind, right? Your mind is your mind an individual thing, or is it something that constantly changes depending upon what it interacts with? And are those entities that are telling you stop doing it? Do they live in your mind? Does your mind live where they live?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. But either way, this whole thing of he was having a real problem with it. Like the experience was so profound, he just wanted to recreate it over and over and over and over and over again.
When I get emails from people who start sounding like they're just about ready to lose it because they're smoking so much DMT, and they want my advice and support and confirmation of their funny ideas, and I just say stop smoking DMT. That's what I'd recommend.
You don't need to do it that often.
Yeah.
That's the one slippery one that I had. I've had it since then, but that one slippery one was a little bit of a wake-up call, because they're like, hey, cocky fuckface, you think you've got a great grip on reality? Why don't you just enter into other dimensions for a couple hours and then come back, and now you feel weird about everything. For 2 weeks. Took 2 weeks to feel normal driving.
Yeah. Well, did you get help?
Nope. Just worked out.
Yeah.
I worked out. I laid in the float tank quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't scary, but it was next door neighbors to scary.
Right.
It was like, if I have to go through life with this elevated level of weirdness and anxiety forever, like this is life now, I'm like, ooh, I don't like this. it was almost like being too high. You know that feeling when I'm a little too high. I don't like this.
Right. Yeah. Well, so it was a close call.
It was a close call. I think it's a wake up call. I don't think. I think these Alex Berenson wrote that book, Tell Your Children. Do you know about that book?
I don't think so.
Alex Berenson used to write for the New York Times, and he wrote a book making a connection between people smoking too much pot and having these psychotic breaks and these schizophrenic breaks. Like, what is going on? What is happening to people? Like, why is that happening? And is it happening proportionate to the population where you would normally get schizophrenics, or is it elevated? Like, what's happening?
Well, if you're kind of prone to schizophrenia,
Right.
it seems pretty clear the more pot you smoke, the more likely you'll have a full break.
Yes.
Yeah.
And see, this is something that we should have known, right? This is something that it's just like people who have alcoholism in their family. Maybe they shouldn't drink.
Right.
I mean, we know people like that, dad was an alcoholic, they can't have a drink. This is a thing that really is unfortunate because they could have studied this and had answers, and we could be able to tell people how to do these things.
Well, I think we should learn from that experience by making sure we're clear about adverse reactions to psychedelics.
Yeah.
The
The same way we are about adverse reactions to anything.
to anything. Yeah. Well, you're talking about that bad trip that just lingered. I had a bad trip when I was in college, an LSD experience, and I didn't take anything for 12 years after that.
Well, mine wasn't a bad trip. That's what was interesting. The trip was magnificent. The trip was spectacular. The trip was incredible. The visuals were beyond my imagination. And the way it affected me, it was like a peeling of layers of bullshit of who I am. But the experience afterwards, it's like I didn't go back to normal. It was so wild, like whatever it was so wild that everyday reality just seemed like, what is this? Is this trick? Is this a trick?
Yeah.
Like, is reality fake? It seemed like real weird, but no one would have noticed. I talked normal. I did normal stuff. I didn't take days off and sit at home and stare at the walls. I just did normal stuff until it all came back to normal.
Did you tell your friends or family?
I think I told a couple of people. I think I told people that do DMT. I definitely know I told Duncan. Definitely know I told Duncan. We talked about it, and that was the thing. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good, and it let me know that hey, what if it's way worse than that?
Well, yeah. What if you're that way for the rest of your life?
Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. What if you we've know those stories of the guys who did too much acid never came back.
Right.
Those are classic stories.
They're true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's good to have a therapist too. Like I was fortunate in that I was in psychoanalysis at the time, and so I could talk to my analyst about how horrible that 5-MeO or it was a bad experience as opposed to yours, but it was quite unsettling, and it really helped to have somebody to get it off my chest with.
Did you feel like you were dead? Did you feel like when you did it, like you were gone?
No, I was stuck in this evil-good loop, like good versus evil, and which was I going to choose?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and I couldn't decide, and I asked the sitter, what should I choose? And they said something like, there's no need to choose, or they're both the same, or something unsatisfactory.
Oh, God.
And I was pretty rattled for a couple of days after that.
So is this when you were coming out of it? Like, did you have a time of the trip where you were just gone, where it was just white fuzz noise?
No, actually, no.
This was different?
Yeah, it was different. It had more content.
How many times did you do 5-MeO?
Oh, gosh. Once pure, the pure drug, and once the toad. Yeah, my experience with the DMT compounds is extensive.
But the experiences with the 5, what I was getting at was, are they uniform?
They're mostly that white light.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be consensus.
But this was a different one.
It was different, yeah.
Was this one from the toad?
No, it was the synthetic.
Oh.
Yeah, I could tell you. I was, looking up at, from the bottom of like a silo, and there was a catwalk that went around and around, the inside of the silo. And there were all these dwarves, like Snow White and the 7 Dwarves with the long sleeves and the long noses and the hood. And that there were like countless just circulating. And they were up to no good. And at the same time, they were beckoning. And I just didn't know what to do. So that's when I opened my eyes and said to my friend, what should I choose?
I wonder if they gave you like a mixture. Has anybody given someone a mixture of 5-MeO and N-DMT?
Yeah, that's pretty, well, I wouldn't say common, but I think it's called Jaguar.
Ooh, I like the name.
Yeah, Ralph Metzner used to provide that to people.
Because I was thinking, like, you're saying something that sounds awfully like the visual DMT experience. Like
I know.
The NN.
I know. It's interesting. Yeah, because most people have the white light.
Yeah, I wonder if you would have gotten like a combo cocktail, like a, what is that, Arnold Palmer?
And Arnold Palmer. Yeah. Shirley Temple.
The Arnold Palmer is like a little bit of iced tea and a little bit of lemonade.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you got.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing. I've just never heard of anybody having such very distinct visuals before like that.
Yeah, my first entity contact was on 5-MeO.
Now, when you say entity, what was it? The first one?
Well, it was these dwarves, these countless dwarves.
That was them.
Yeah.
That was the first entity contact.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you think you were seeing when you're seeing them?
I had no idea. I figured, I was under the influence, and that's what I was seeing.
You just were going with it.
Yeah. Observing. Well, if you're in it, you can't do anything. I mean, you can only, observe, partake.
Do you think that when you're tripping like that, are you entering into a world that already exists, or are you changing something?
Well, I think you're changing your ability to perceive things that are normally invisible.
So they're there all the time.
They're there all the time, either in your mind, unconscious, or out there in the ether.
Mm.
And that's what we were talking about earlier, that it's really hard to tell.
Right.
But the important thing, though, I believe, is that it doesn't make a lot of difference right now anyway, because we can't really design experiments to determine that. The important thing is the information that you're getting out of it. What's it good for? Are you able to extract any valuable information for yourself or for other people?
Mm. Now, when you first started doing these studies, how did you devise a protocol? How did you figure out what the dosage was going to be for these people? How many times they were going to do it? Did you have like test subjects? Like pre-test subjects? Like how did you devise a protocol?
Well, the main person who was advising me was a pediatric neuroendocrinologist.
Whoa.
A pediatric neuroendocrinologist. And the research I had done as a fellow and with the melatonin work was what you would call clinical neuroendocrinology. So in a way, my study with DMT was using DMT as a neuroendocrinological probe. It was a psychopharmacology study.
Wow.
Yeah, it's what's called dose-response work. You give small doses, medium doses, and you give big doses. You need to characterize as many of the effects as you can.
Now, you did it intravenously, which I thought was really fascinating because it extends the experience, right?
Well, the majority of previous studies gave it intramuscularly.
Really?
The Hungarian studies, Budapest, Stephen Jara.
What is that like?
Well, good question. And I did bring in someone to receive a test, dose of the intramuscular.
Did you have a hard time finding somebody for that?
Man, my friends were lining up.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, so Terence McKenna and I developed the idea behind the DMT study in the first place, like a couple of years before it actually got approved. I didn't know what approach to take. And I went over to his place one day. This was the summer of '88. And we just, brainstormed the entire afternoon up in his loft. And we decided, or what we concluded was that we would, that I would apply for funding from the war on drugs. That, that would be the best way to study DMT, is to get money from the war on drugs.
How did you phrase it?
Well, instead of saying that DMT is an amazingly cool drug, we said DMT is an amazingly weird drug or potentially dangerous, might be involved in psychosis. People are abusing it.
Oh.
The things that we proposed were coming at it from the perspective of public health, as opposed to spirituality or psychotherapy. The more we understand about DMT, the more we'll understand about LSD, maybe more about psychosis and schizophrenia. So it was phrased or looked at as a series of experiments with public health implications.
There's something seriously cool about getting the first psychedelic studies funded by the war on drugs.
It was an amazing stretch there.
It must have felt amazing that you pulled it off.
Well, my volunteers and I every so often would look at each other and say, "This isn't really happening, is it?" It was unbelievable.
That's pretty unbelievable, pretty awesome.
It was just occurring in complete isolation, too, at the University Hospital in Albuquerque in the early 90s. I mean, nobody knew what we were doing.
So how did you devise the dosage? Like when you're doing it intravenously, how did you figure out how much to give people to have the maximum experience, or what did you do?
Yeah. Good question. Let me pee.
Oh, okay,
again, yeah.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen, with the answer to that question. So, we left off with how you figured out what dose to give people to have this experience.
It was the one person that we gave intramuscular DMT to described it as much slower than the smoked and wasn't as intense. So because we wanted to replicate the smoked experience, we then switched to IV. So the standard intramuscular dose is 1 milligram per kilogram.
Was there a reason why you didn't just have the people smoke it?
Smoking would have been complicated. It is hard to get as much DMT into your lungs as you need for a breakthrough through smoking.
Right.
From coughing, or the room starts breaking up and you're kind of losing your orientation. There'd be combustion products that would be, not DMT that people were smoking.
Mm.
And we didn't really want to expose people's lungs to chemicals unless we needed to. So we switched to the IV. The IV method of giving any drug is the fastest, even faster than smoking or snorting.
Smoking? Oh, I didn't know you can snort it. Do people snort it?
People, well, I mean,
of course they do. Why did I even ask that?
Yeah, and you can snort other drugs, like any kind of drug, for example.
Right, I've never thought anybody would snort DMT.
Well, if you make a water soluble salt of DMT, you can snort it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you smoke the freebase.
But you can't crush the freebase up and snort that.
I don't think it would work. It might, but when people do snort it, it's the water soluble form.
What is that stuff that they do where it's like a snuff that they blow up each other's noses, and it does have psychedelic chemicals in it? I think it might even have DMT in it, right?
Right. The Amazonian psychedelic snuffs.
Yeah.
They contain DMT, 5-methoxy-DMT, bufotenine, and some obscure tryptamines.
And it's supposed to be horrendous, right? You shoot it up the nose, and it's just disgusting.
Yeah, you've seen those black and white pictures that they took in the Amazon in the 40s and 50s. Yeah.
Could you imagine getting a blast of that stuff up your nose?
Not really.
But if that was the only way you could get to reach the spirit realm, you'd do it.
Right. I mean, people do a lot of extreme things to attain spiritual experience.
How much have you paid attention to Graham Hancock's work on the Amazon, how they're rediscovering these civilizations, and also the use of, there's a bunch of different researchers using LiDAR down there.
Right.
Where they're going over the jungle and they're finding grids and the cities that used to exist down there. And Graham thinks that there might have been cities with like millions of people in them. that existed before the Europeans came through and gave them all smallpox.
Well, yeah, Graham's been really important in making people aware of the role of psychedelics, across all cultures,
Yeah.
across time.
I got Graham on the podcast. I got him high. He hadn't been high in like 2 years.
Yeah, he told me that. He blames you now.
I would go, just don't go so hard.
Yeah, he said
He was going too hard.
Yeah, he was really proud of himself, and then he got stoned in your show.
But then he got stoned and he was just on fire. The moment he got stoned, just breaking down how, I think essentially we were talking about the dating of civilizations, about how arrogant people are with their initial assertions of what the origins or the timeline of civilization is. He's like, the timeline of civilization is still a mystery, and they're pushing it further and further back with every discovery. And they keep finding stuff that pushes it further back, further back, further back. They're finding complex stone structures that are 14,000 years old, 12,000 years old.
Yeah.
Like Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 years old. That's a long fucking time ago. And they keep finding all this evidence of human beings being older than we thought they were. I think that this younger dryas impact theory is probably the best theory when it comes to explaining why we're so wacky. I think we had once achieved some very high level of sophistication. I think that's what explains ancient Egypt. That's what explains some spectacular construction methods that were from thousands and thousands of years ago. And then we got wiped out almost to the point of extinction, and then we rebuilt back again with a bunch of shit that we didn't understand, and a bunch of people that came from really smart people but had been living like fucking barbarians for the last couple hundred years. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, I wonder, well, are you familiar with Julian James and the bicameral mind?
I've heard that name, and I've heard of that book.
Yeah, so James believed that up until a certain point that it was a common phenomenon for people to hear a spoken voice.
That's right.
That's where people got their information, was from the spoken voice.
Could you imagine if that's really how people used to interact with God? That God used to just talk to you?
Well, yeah. His theory proposes that the prophets were the transition.
Oh, wow.
Between the bicameral mind being common and it kind of dying off. There's no there's no hard evidence of the brain communicating differently back then, because it disappears quickly, soft tissue.
What do you think of Terence McKenna and Dennis McKenna's theory about monkeys eating psilocybin? Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense. Yeah.
If you don't tell people what the idea is, that the grasslands, that the rainforest receded into grasslands, and the monkeys came down. They started experimenting with new food, and they found psilocybin. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, but these compounds, psychedelics, stimulate the growth of new neurons,
right.
Neurogenesis, and also stimulate the complexity and number of connections among neurons. That's called neuroplasticity. So it could be that there were neuroplastic effects in the monkeys that were using psilocybin. That would be an explanation of how there would be an evolution of consciousness, which would be passed on and continue.
One of the big fun theories that people like to talk about when it comes to human beings, people that are like alien enthusiasts, they like to say, well, human beings are the product of some sort of accelerated evolution. So that the aliens came down here and they ran experiments with these primal people and converted them into modern people. Yeah, we can get some of that.
Yeah.
But the question is, maybe that's what mushrooms are. Like, maybe that's what that means. You're consuming something that gives you this entirely alien experience. It's causing neuroplasticity. It's causing neurogenesis. It's making you more creative. It makes you have a better ability to see motion, right? Doesn't it aid in visual acuity?
Acuity, it
Yeah.
does, yeah, and sensitivity too.
And the ability to detect parallel lines moving. There was someone who did that study. There was a straight scientist who did this study where they gave people psilocybin and they showed them parallel lines and as they're moving off parallel, that the people on psilocybin could see it way quicker.
Yeah. Well, the question is whether those traits can be passed on to the next generation. That's what's called Lamarckian, transmission. It's called epigenetics now. Activation of certain genes can be passed on hereditarily. So it could be that the increase in neuroplasticity and neurogenesis is passed on.
Well, something happened to people, right? I mean, we'll keep you off camera.
Yeah, keep me off camera.
Keep them off camera, Jamie. Something happened to people because the human brain doubled over a period of just a couple million years, which coincides with the timeline that McKenna proposed, that these rainforests were starting to recede during that same time period, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to wonder what the DMT system in the brain was doing at that time, too. I wonder if that was a time of rapid growth of the DMT neurotransmitter system.
Yeah, and what was the natural state of DMT back then, too? I mean, one of the things that I would imagine is that people who have to live like a very hard scrabble hunter-gatherer life. You're out there in tents. You're trying to protect your children from predators. You're living this very tuned in to everything around your life. It's probably a very, very different experience in terms of just how they perceive the world itself, how they perceive reality. Because one of the things that has to it seems like it kind of has to happen as things get safer and easier, you get less of a concern and a fear of danger. And so your ability to detect danger kind of atrophies. Whereas someone who lived at the beginning of human civilization would have been just a super intelligent animal almost.
Right.
Just tuned into everything. Just like animals are if you go snap a twig near a deer and their heads spin around, bear smells you from fucking 3 football fields away. That's normal for them. We maybe had a better sense of the world around us. I mean, think about how bad our senses are. Our noses are terrible. They barely do anything. Maybe they were really good at one point in time, and we just didn't need them anymore, and it atrophied. If you had a wolf that was near you and you could smell it, that would be a very good thing to stay alive. Well, they can smell you. I bet you used to be able to smell them, but we've been living in houses for so long.
Well, the brain, the olfactory centers in the brain are the oldest. Perceptual centers in the brain.
Really?
Yeah, so obviously...
They could smell before they could see? If they're the oldest?
Well, if you smell things, it'll stimulate memories.
Yeah.
So that's not the case with other senses. There's a connection between the olfactory sense and memory, which is the strongest among the senses.
Wow.
Which indicates that our sense of smell once was much more important.
Wow. Well, it had to be. If we didn't have doors.
It would have to be.
It'd have to be.
Right.
You have to be able to smell things, hear things. You have to be able to feel the vibrations on the ground of something running at you so you can get a jump at it. I mean, that environment, if you introduced psilocybin to that environment, and that's what created human beings, that is a fascinating theory. And the thing is, we know psilocybin is real, and we know its effects are profound. And so to dismiss it as being what happened, I don't think that's wise. I think there's a problem with what mushrooms are. It's people think they're so silly. I'm tripping on mushrooms. It's you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. Oh, look at Todd, he's over there on mushrooms. But what it probably is some kind of a chemical gateway to some either state of mind or some other dimension. And if you gave that to some savage proto-hominid that was just living naked, running away from jaguars all the time, and this thing starts tripping and starts figuring out tools and starts figuring out how to make sounds to indicate different animals.
Well, it's in a direction. The effect of the psilocybin is in a direction. So that's an interesting thing to consider.
In a direction in what way? What do you mean by that?
Well, towards increasing civilization, towards language, towards love as opposed to hatred. Let's say.
Yeah, it would help them form tribes, especially if they were all doing it together.
Well, so you'd then argue for an evolutionary advantage for hominids that were taking psilocybin. It gave them an advantage.
At what point in time do you think people forgot that psilocybin was beneficial? And what were the steps to get people to not have access to that information anymore, not be aware of how long, for what an enormous history, people were consuming them?
How long? There's turf. So look at the major religious institutions, and they're stamping out psychedelic use in the indigenous world. If you could stamp out the states, then you kind of have the hegemony over those states, or you can promise them if you pray or if you're good or if you do various things. So there's politics involved, competing groups, those that used mushrooms probably and those who didn't. There would probably be some climactic and environmental ones too, that the range of the mushrooms was shrinking.
Right, like some sort of climate change, and they were forced out of areas that used to grow them all the time, so they stopped using them, and they started taking alcohol and other things. It's just, since we know so much about them today, in comparison to what people knew in the 50s and the 60s, like publicly we know so much more about them. So there's so much real scientific data out there. There's so many real intelligent people who are enthusiasts of them that can kind of explain the benefits of it. It's just amazing that it's taken so long to just get one state to make it legal.
Well, what would you like to see the future of psychedelic use? Would you want everybody to be tripping in the best of all possible worlds, like Tim Leary, Ken Kesey, just everybody?
Those guys went too hard. I think they scared a lot of people. I think those guys, they were so tune out or drop out. They were so culty, and they had a wild bus and they threw wild parties. I think a lot of people got freaked out by rooting for their eyes and their kids to.
Aber ein Geräusch!
Habt ihr das auch gehört?
Da ist was!
Propaganda minister should be around here somewhere.
Wir haben einen toten Mann! Deckung! Verstanden!
Nothing else to find.
Verdammt, bleib, wo du bist! Noch einer am Boden!
There's Hopper, propaganda minister. Over and out, my friend. Over and out.
Wartet! Muss nachladen! Lade nach! Gib mir Deckung!
Munition ausgegangen! Wir müssen unsere Stellung halten! Controlli la tua ultima posizione!
Muss hier verteidigen, koste es, was es wolle!
Dove è finito? Presto! Trovatelo! Apritevi avversari!
Agli ordini, signore! Continua a cercare! Occhio a
Can't find anything else.
Ja, ich bin in Deckung!
Galvani should be around here.
Roberto! Inspeccionar el posto!
Jawohl, Herr Leutnant. Continua cantare! Gnade da! Jetzt hab ich dich!
Danach, gib mir Deckung! Begebt euch an seine Position! Lieber mal nachsehen, ob wir ihn erwischt haben. Behaltet mich im Auge! Überprüft seine letzte bekannte Position! Ich bin dir auf der Spur, Hexenschütze! Zünde dich, Heckenschütze!
Keine Munition. Muss nachladen.
Galvani. Looks like he took the brave way out. Better search his body. This'll come in very easy. This isn't just a suicide note. It's the cipher. Library. Variana told OSS the research was contained in a music box. Looks like the Nazis don't know that yet. The music box. That's the research accounted for. Who needs keys when a satchel bomb will do? I've got what I came for. Now I need to get to the exfiltration point. Well, well. What do we have here then? Guess I grabbed everything useful.
Leuchtsignal machen. Sofort rüber. Jetzt gehört noch mir.
That's all. I think I've grabbed all I can.
Hier spricht Leutnant Gerhard Blecker. Autorisationscode Eisenskorpion. Ich brauche sofort die Einheit Valkyrie. Sofort, verdammt, sofort!
Better find a good position. They've arrived.
covered!
So much for the Green Devils. Galvani's suicide was a tragedy. But at least I grabbed his research and helped Veriana escape. The locket Veriana gave me contained the key to the music box and to Galvani's research notes. His papers said the plutonium particles I intercepted were just samples, the byproduct of the Nazis' atomic program, but that they planned to drop vast quantities of the particles on Allied troops during the imminent Normandy landings. Hitler's Deathstorm will rain horror on our men and halt the liberation of Europe in its tracks. I can't let that happen.